Before we get started, please check out our sponsor, Amerigold.com. That's Amerigold.com. Simple diversification into precious metals. Give you and your family the peace of mind that you deserve. Click the link below right now. Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green and you're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. This is a very, very dangerous time in American history, and some people are calling it the new Cold War. There's even been a few books on it called the Coldest War, the Colder War. All of this is a spin on what was the Cold War that sent the baby boomer generation into their bunkers, underneath their desks, as if that was going to protect them from a nuclear event. And I find it funny that everyone now seems to recognize that post-2008, post the largest financial collapse in the history of the world, that suddenly the United States may be in fact on the brink of war. But they only have part of the story correct. You see, this is much bigger than just a Cold War. This is much bigger than Russia just being a little irked at the United States for helping the revolution in Kiev. You see, this is a world war, folks, and we've been talking about it on this channel for going on 5-6 years now, post the 2008 bailouts, post the $4+ trillion on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, so that they could stoke up and masturbate the stock market to a new all-time high, and then applaud themselves when they release QE after 6 friggin' years. If somehow that's a good job and there'll be no unintended consequences in the future. Like we didn't learn our lesson in 2008, post the easing that made up the previous Fed chairman, Alan Greenspan, and his 0% interest rates, which fueled the largest asset bubble and asset bubbles across the country in the world that we'd ever seen. And now they've done the same thing once again. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, is speaking and spoke today, depending on if you live here in the States or you're overseas, at a Chinese event, which also included Russia. And he said that, you know, he really wants to promote the Chinese and U.S. relationship, which I couldn't find and believe to be any more funny. He also talked of China being the second largest economy in the world, and that's also incorrect. China has now overtaken the United States in real wealth, in real dollars, when measuring real money. Again, all we have here in the United States is the Federal Reserve funny money system. This $4+ trillion of debt, new debt on the balance sheet, on the back of taxpayers, so that they could stoke and masturbate the stock market up to an all-time high. But don't worry about the unintended consequences. You know, even people, pioneers in the Ponzi scheme like Alan Greenspan, are saying gold is now a good investment. Yeah, get your hands on gold now that they've totally manipulated our currency, the US dollar, here in the United States. And at some point in the future, we're going to get runaway inflation. We haven't seen it yet. It's been massaged around 2% a year. Still, that's 12% of your money over the last 6 years, if you're counting. It's stealing that $4 trillion in the backs of you, your children's children, and your future's children. But again, folks, this is larger than just a Cold War. You know, many people don't understand Ukraine, including pundits in the so-called alternative media. They actually think that Putin invaded Ukraine, and they couldn't be any more wrong. The United States stimulated, as they do here in the States and all over the world, through these radical revolutions and re-revolutions, whether or not it was the Arab Spring protests that spilled all over the Middle East, or it was the revolution and re-revolution in places like Egypt, or it was the Kiev toppling of the Yanukovych government in Ukraine, which was all stimulated by the United States federal government. You see, Vladimir Putin, was only responding to U.S. meddling, to U.S. intervention. And that's why he's sending tanks in now, because you see, he controls something that the United States and the European Union wants: natural gas. And you see, the European Union and the cronies here in the States, the West that makes up Western powers, don't want to rely on a monopoly, on a Russian monopoly on natural gas. And it's why they helped topple the Kiev government with radicals, the same radicals that shot on the same protesters that supposedly revolted. And so the European Union, the United States, has a self-interest to topple Ukraine, which they've effectively done. And now they're blaming Putin like he's doing something wrong. Now, again, I'm not pro-Russian, as some of these quote-unquote alternative media pundits are that actually work for the regime that makes up Putin's government. I'm just spitting the truth as it really is. And it's exactly why we're at war today. It's why the Russian government, along with the rising East that makes up the Dragon China, is moving away from the US dollar. They're moving into their own currencies. They could care less about the US sanctions on Russia. Yes, it's arguably hurting Russia's economy temporarily. It's putting pressure on the ruble, etc. China, but this is all a natural progression to a new order. And guess what? It doesn't make up the United States anymore. We have already fallen behind China. China is now a more powerful, arguably, economically and wealthier country than the United States of America. Let me give you a specific example. Since 2009, right about the time Hope and Changer Obama became president of the United States, he's barely kept up with inflation in terms of investing in national defense here in the United States of America, meaning he really hasn't done any kind of investment, made any kind of investment into our defenses here in the United States, making himself a laughingstock around the world. China, on the other hand, has doubled their national defense spending as we approach war. As we soon approach this global confrontation, many would argue a conflagration of war. Again, it's not a Cold War, it's not the colder war, it's not the coldest war, it's not all these books and pundits people are talking about, even though we've been talking about this for 5-6 years now, since the post-2008 financial Armageddon. All of this a byproduct of this, by the way. This is a new global engagement, it is a new world war, where the United States takes a second seat. We take a seat behind these other countries. Now again, I love this country. I love America. It's one of the reasons why I'm so darn outspoken on a regular basis. But thinking from the enemy's perspective, enemies of the United States, now's the time to kick the United States in the balls and knock out their front teeth. Because we are structurally weak, we are structurally insolvent, we are bankrupt to the core, not just literally courtesy of the Federal Reserve, but metaphorically here in the United States. Our political system, our politicians corrupt at the very core of Washingtonian politics. Now, may I mention the police state, the surveillance state that made up the Edward Snowden leaks, the wiretapping of innocent Americans, the IRS scandal, Benghazi Gate courtesy of Hillary Clinton, etc., etc. This is all reaching a boiling point, folks, and there will be hell to pay when this unwinds. When the rampant inflation finally comes to roost, and Americans pay the price. Not the politicians that cause it, not the criminal private Federal Reserve that orchestrated this masturbation Ponzi scheme in the first place. But you will pay the price, my friend. Innocent Americans, your children, and your future children's children. I suggest we take our country back. I suggest the American people rally behind the cause that made up the spirit of our founding fathers and the revolution that actually established this 1776 great constitutional republic that once was, that has now turned the other cheek and is stepping in towards the darkness of tyranny. I'm Christopher Green. Get this video out everywhere, make it viral, hard-hitting it in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor.